Thanks, Tyler. I'd like to, again, hello everybody and welcome for attending our joint webinar. And my name is Ted Miller. I'm COO of Adventure Office. I've been in the adventure travel space from a software perspective since the 2011, but also the software reservation space from about the late 90s. So I've got a lot of experience in this space. And one thing I can say about the vast majority of the clients I've worked with over the years, none of them are really crazy about technology, but they know they can benefit from it. They'd rather be either on the river or in the woods with their clients presenting a great guest experience. Orbis and Adventure Office have partnered together, and our goal, we have several parts of the goal, but part of it is being a resource for whether it's reservations or online bookings, or just have some general questions about your own website. We'd like to be, you just need to reach out to us. We're happy to chat with you, give you our 2 cents worth from our experience. A lot of times I can help just answer some questions, because talking with a lot of the different Orbis endorsed partners, some of you guys have had software for years, some have online bookings, some are still Excel spreadsheets and whatnot. We're happy to help on whatever level it may be. I also like to start, this is the same slide I started with when we were at the Guide Rendezvous in Asheville. It's just an interesting component where it shows that the fly fishing and rifle hunting are increasing in size. And what's really interesting is that for the first time, outdoor industry is considered part of the GNP by the U.S. government, which is going to be bringing more exposure to it. But something that I'd like to display or show on here also is, the more I talk with a lot of partners, they're looking for things that can be done by non-participants, whether it's a spouse or their kids or just a friend that may not fish, may not wing shoot, or what have you. For example, here we can look at stand-up paddleboarding, which is actually larger than fly fishing, but it's growing at a huge percentage. And this is an activity that requires very little investment, and obviously you need some body of water. But whether it's stand-up yoga or just something for the kids to do, there are ways that you'll find that you engage the non-participants and still participate in the growing trends within the space. It's just an interesting perspective. But at $524 billion, it is a substantial market. And I apologize a little bit for the fuzziness of this graphic. What we wanted to show here is that a lot of online bookings are occurring. And when I talk to people, a lot of the owners have the same philosophy. But what this is showing is companies that are doing between 1 and 5 million in sales, 42% of their reservations are coming from online. 5 million and up, 34%, and then the 250 to 1 million is 31%. So these are substantial percentages of business that are coming online. And I normally like to talk about this a little bit at the beginning of the CRM because it fits into it. But a lot of times I'll have people say, yeah, I have to talk with everybody because I have a complex trip or adventure. Whether it's a certain number of days on a particular river or combination of equipment that they're looking for. But some things to consider is if people are booking online, the first 15 to 20 minutes of any reservation process when you're on the phone is how many, what dates, how much, so on and so forth, and getting payment. Well, you can follow up each online booking with a phone call, and you can still have that warm and fuzzy conversation with them after the purchase is already made. Again, you have complex trips. I have to talk to everybody. Something to keep in mind is online bookings can also apply to your past guests, repeat guests. A lot of times they know what they want to do. They know when they want to do it, and they may be looking at this at night. And I also hear, I don't want to redo my website. Most of the systems these days that are out there, as far as online bookings and reservation, most of them can integrate to your existing website and have it be a seamless experience, so you don't have to reinvent your website. Obviously, you've already made a substantial investment in that part. And also, it's really neat to make money when you're sleeping at night. I mean, what I like to do is think of online bookings, which is kind of a techie term. I like to think of it as a virtual reservationist. We've got a reservationist that's never sick, never comes in late, never has personal issues, and plus they work 24/7, 365. And what you'll find is typically in the first full year of online bookings, your virtual reservationist will do as many reservations as your best reservationist on your staff. And I know sometimes that's a little, people tend to kind of skeptical on that, but that's what we've seen over and over and over again. And something else to keep in mind when we're talking is, when one theme that I've heard from many partners, my clients are getting older, and at some point I'm going to need to find the next generation or the next generations below us. Well, quite honestly, a lot of those generations don't want to talk to somebody. They are looking to book online. So even if it's not now or next year, it is something that you should put in your plans. And let's kind of dig into what I consider customer relationship management, which can cover a wide gambit of information. And also, just to let you know, we're shooting for about 30 minutes on the slide component and then open it up to questions. So if you let Tyler know during the time, we'll bring up those questions later on to the chat. And so when we get into CRM, obviously the prospective guest generation, what's nice is with the I'm not going to, this can include many things, you know, your SEO, your search engine optimization, your search engine marketing, direct mail, your social media, print, local promotions, so on and so forth. And that's a conversation all into itself. And a number of expertise. I've seen a lot of your websites and people that you work with and other partners within Orbis that you work with are experts in this area. So we're not going to delve into that because that's just too much detail today. So when you're looking for prospective guest generation, that obviously leads into conversion. We want to convert lookers into bookers. And once again, not just online, but primarily through the back office. So, and also with, most of you do not have walk-in guests, but some of you do. But some of also to keep in mind when you're looking at your business operations, this conversion prospect to guest, this can also include upselling of guests. So they're coming for a week and you have some additional items that they might be able to purchase, or for a non-participant. I've seen more partners start to offer, for example, there's one lodge in particular that we work with that offers great fly fishing. Well, they've added mountain biking. They're looking at adding eco tours, where as far as naturalists and taking people on hikes, and they're looking to engage a larger portion of the audience versus just the fishermen or wing shooters. And you guys already are experts at great guest experience. And with the great guest experience, it really can make a huge difference in repeat guests and everything else. I know in one case where I go to a particular hotel where I travel, I'll always go back to that location because whenever I show up, they always remember who I am and call me by my first name. So when you're looking at that great guest experiences, once again, one of the partners I've talked with like to do birthday cakes if they're there during their birthday, or favorite food, or just engaging in past experiences. And then we get into the repeat guest experience. And a couple things to keep in mind with repeat guests. They typically are your lowest cost of acquisition, obviously because they've already spent time with you. And one of the things to consider when you're looking at your repeat guests, are you getting all the information of all the people that are attending, or are you getting just of the party member? Because once again, if you've got repeat guests, if you want to be sure that you can market to all of them later instead of just the party leaders. I think most of the partners do a really good job that I've spoken to in that arena. And one thing that leads straight from repeat guests is personal guest referrals. A lot of companies I've talked with, just not endorsed partners, take this particular step for, they don't pay a lot of attention to it, or what they like to do is, well, if my guests like me, they'll refer guests. You should actually actively try to promote to your guest to refer you to their friends and family. It can make a really big difference. And what's nice is, once again, a lot of times when I'm traveling, if I've got a personal referral from somebody I know, I'll look at that option even if the price is more expensive because I've got that personal referral. So it's, once again, much more than just a review on TripAdvisor, which is important to have. But if you can have that personal referral, it's going to make a big difference in your repeat guests as they grow into that process. So once again, it's important when you're looking at your business operations, do you have that process in place? It could be it's just saying thank you. It could be paying them, could be a fly rod for, you know, put it into for the person that, companies that, so when your new guests arrive and say, I was referred by so-and-so, and you could then put that into a drawing for a nice fly rod, or it could be any number of things. It doesn't necessarily be monetary. But what I've found is when people have implemented that system, they've gone from just making the assumption to actually promoting, that their referrals increase by 15 to 20%. And with each of those phases, each part of them have their own process. So in this case, let's kind of do a little deeper dive into the great guest experience from the prior page. This all begins with the booking experience online and on the phone. And part of this is it's not just when you're on the phone. Once again, if you're in a spot where, kind of boiling down to the next spot is, when I'm talking with somebody on the phone, your seasonal staff, do they have access to the history or the favorite food or the first names or birthdays or anniversary dates of your guests when they're calling, of your repeat guests when they're calling? Are they able to do the same level of interaction with the guests that you are? Once again, a lot of times you've got this great information, but if it's not accessible other than in somebody's, because they've been with you for 20 years, it's hard to look at that, to leverage that in the most, what I find most beneficial manner possible. The next step is once they have booked, these are all touch points you have the opportunity with the guest. The pre-arrival communication, trip reminders, gear list. It might just be a nice note. Hey, just see your trip's coming. You'll be with us in about a month. We're really looking forward to seeing you. The hatch is expected to be right on time. The water is high. Any sort of message that you'd like. And when you start looking at some of these things, that's where customer relationship management systems come into place. Because a lot of the times your staff are already at 120% capacity. And if these sort of things are manual tasks or one-offs, it becomes very hard to implement them. Things as simple as a gear reminder a month out, or anything along those lines. Once again, it's just that additional interaction with the guests that if I've gone with you, but I've also gone with other outfitters in different parts of the country, if I'm down to one trip in a year or 2 years from now, I'm probably going to pick where I've had the best experience versus the lowest price. We've already talked a bit about the arrival process, knowing them by first name, things along those lines. Again, if you can use a system that allows you to see, okay, here's who's coming in today, and here's the first names of everybody coming in today, and ask the guest just to refer that, or picking people, if you're picking people up at the plane, or at a spot where you're meeting them via boat. Once again, if you can communicate with them in first name, it just personalizes, like, wow, this company really cares about my experience because they've remembered who I am, even though I haven't been here before. And obviously build a relationship during the stay. And this would be, what I mean about this is when you start to have any members of your staff that can start to gather key pieces of information without really seeming to ask. It might be a guide asking what their favorite food is out on the river. It might be they're sitting down for dinner and we're just asking for a first name. It could be, it's anything along those lines. Birthdays are always a good one, anniversary dates. Anything that's personalized to that particular guest. The departure experience goes without saying. Once again, is it easy for them? Is it a long process? I think in most of your cases, it's you guys have already nailed down exceptionally well the arrival, the building, and then the departure. You guys are really experts in that area. The post-communication, once again, is a really important aspect of how we communicate with the guests after they've departed. They've had a great experience. Now let's communicate with them, not just right after, for example, a survey, or please leave us a review on TripAdvisor, a newsletter. It could be pictures that you send out once a month of fish that have been caught. Maybe you send out the fish that were caught when you're in the middle of the winter when they're thinking of the upcoming trips. Anything along those lines. And once again, it gets back to scalability. Does your staff have time to go out and do these manually, Or wouldn't it be nice if you had a system that would automatically send out the survey review and newsletter keyed upon departure dates or on a monthly basis? And once again, in that post communication is asking for referrals. It's a great way to give them a reminder about the highlights of their trip and ask them if they have any friends or family that would like to learn more about your trips. Whether you're following up with their friends or if they're just passing please pass this on to your friends that might be interested with a link back to your website. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it should go into a process that goes into that spot. And when we're looking at a lot of these things, when I first started in this business and I started mapping out a CRM for a couple of companies I've had, it could really boil down to, it's like, my goodness, that's a lot of steps. Where do I even begin? But, as they say in the Chinese proverb, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And we're going to get into a little bit about how you break this down into manageable parts and pieces. Because it's great to talk about, it'd be neat to do these things, but how do you break them down and actually achieve them? Keeping it simple is what I have found works for almost everything over the years. With a website integration, with your inquiry screen or your online bookings, many of you don't have online bookings, but almost all of you have an inquiry screen or a contact us form. And that's one of these areas that you can kind of take for granted, because currently with your contact us form on your website, what happens with it? Does somebody fill it out and does it just come into your general email box? Does somebody keep an eye on those and follow up with them to answer questions or re-engage or to engage the client if they have questions? How do you know it's been fulfilled? If there are call notes, i.e., I sent an inquiry, my brothers and I are interested in booking a fishing trip down the Yellowstone for the 3rd week of August, but we have a lot of questions. Where are those questions, when those questions are answered, where are the answers put? How do I know who spoke with them? How do I know somebody spoke with me today, but they start vacation tomorrow, and I call back with a call tomorrow? How does that information transact? So something as simple as your inquiry form. If it comes into a CRM system, whether it's reservation software or something like Salesforce or even MailChimp and some of the other ones, the key is if you can automate that, so when it comes in, it automatically creates a customer record in your system. And in that customer record, it keeps track of all the email communication sent out by the system, so that you communicate from within this system to your guests instead of each person's individual emails through the company. And in that system is where you can put notes. Here's what we talked about today. Here's what our strategy is. Here are the questions they had. And by the way, they asked me to follow up in 2 weeks, so I'm going to schedule a task. And in 2 weeks when I follow up, this is what I need to follow up with them with. So especially when you're speaking with a lot of your clients multiple times, especially new clients, how does that information transition? Where is it stored? Is it sticky notes on the wall? Is it in the notebook that people keep and pass around? I've seen a lot of different systems. But the key is you want to be able to leverage that. So once again, that's an example if you did nothing else but interacted and integrated an inquiry or contact us form into this type of system, that by itself would improve your communication with the guest and the guest experience, and also decrease the number of steps your staff are currently taking. So you don't have to do all of it at one time to have meaningful benefit from implementing even basic CRMs. So the next one, the guest information. We've got 20 years of information. We've got it written down in the book. And it's okay, how many people do you have making reservations? Well, when we're busy, we've got 3 people on the phone. And I said, do they share the book? No, it's in the back office where we keep it. Well, it's great to have that history. But if you're people that are communicating with your guest before they book, or during their stay, or when they're out on the river, or afterwards, if your staff can't access that information, it's hard to leverage that into a position that it's going to increase that, once again, that relationship or the way the client looks at the professionalism and engagement by your company. So if it's something, once again, if it's in a CRM system where when they're on the phone, they could put in the person's first name and it brings up all their history. It brings up all the reservations they've done. It brings up, oh, here, I see that you're talking with Ted last week. He's on vacation this week, but I can help answer those questions. I see that you wanted to come the third week of August. Well, that means the guest has not had to repeat all of that stuff for me because the person I spoke to last week was on vacation this week when I called back. And with the email systems, there's a lot of different flavors. Obviously, a lot of people use a combination of their business email, whether it's Outlook or Gmail or what have you. And they use a separate email marketing system. It might be MailChimp, might be Constant Contact. And both of those they're good systems for what they do. They do well. But the key is, are they all separated systems? The automated emails would be set up so that you could create a number of templates in the system, and then I want to send this template a number of hours or days prior to arrival, and this one I want to send 7 days after departure, and this one I want to send 6 months after departure. And to be able to set that and then have those key off the dates of each reservation that are put into the system. Once again, it takes a little time to create the template the first time and the content. And once again, these templates can be personalized in most systems. You have merge fields, first name, name of the trip, different things that you've gathered. Once again, you've got that information, engage it in these templates to personalize it. But to have those be able to go out automatically and keep track that they were sent out can make a huge, can make a huge difference in your guest communication. And I've talked with a lot of people that would like to do this, but they haven't. Number one is they just don't have the time. And the reservation system, there's a lot of flavors. Obviously, that's a business that we're in, but there's a lot of systems that are out there, and we're always happy to chat about different systems and if you're interested. But some things that a lot of systems can do these days is send out quotes. For example, we're talking on the phone. Once again, this goes down to interaction with a guest and saving your team time. We've just spent half an hour on the phone. It's the first time we're talking with this guest. Once again, they want to go the second week of August down the Carlick River up in Kodiak, Alaska, and you get to the point. It's fantastic. I just need a credit card to confirm it, and you hear on the other side, I just need to talk to my father's sister's cousin's uncle, brother-in-law before I can confirm. We have to talk among the group tonight. I'm just the one getting information. Any of those reasons, which are all valid. So, okay, well, let us send you an email that summarizes all the stuff we've talked about, or potentially a Word document that has a lot of detail in it and could act as a ability for them to sign and email back, print, sign, and email back. But what about if you had this in your system and you could click on a button, and what that button would do is send them a fully quote right out of your system to your guest, and the guest could then review it at their leisure. They could talk about it that night. They could look at it the next day, whatever it might be. But when they're ready to make a decision, they don't have to call back. They can simply click on a link and make a payment online. It saves the back and forth from I sent them an email, I called them 2 days later because I hadn't called back. I left a message. They left me a message the next night. We played phone tag and email tag. It eliminates that process. And when you're sending out these quotes, with the systems, you want to be sure that if you do send out quotes, that it does not consume your availability until somebody actually makes a payment, and it revalidates availability when they go to make it. Because you might send a quote to somebody that doesn't look at it for 3 weeks for whatever reason. And in the meantime, that trip hasn't been booked because somebody else called up and did have a credit card and gave you that information. So that a good reservation system can put a lot of the quotes. Once they're confirmed, they become bookings, and they flow right into your operations management, your guide scheduling, so on and so forth. And let's talk about waivers for a moment. This is something that is normally very mundane and not very exciting. Most of the companies I've talked to are still using paper waivers, which are fine. And the information they're getting, first name, last name, email, address, phone number, things like that, which is great information. And one thing that I find that few people do, or I should say the better companies are doing, is do you take that information from the paper waivers and enter it into whatever system that you're using to communicate and market with your guest? Because, using an example, let's say if you had 1,000 guests a year, your average group size is 4. But you only get the party leader's information. So of that group, you're getting one person. And then let's say if you have a 30% repeat guess. Well, so if we do the math, we take 1,000 clients, we times it by the 25% people that we're getting the information from, and we times that by 30%, so we're getting 75 repeat guests, which is pretty nice. Well, what about if you did get all that information? Granted, some of it's going to be family related, so you're not going to get a true, but let's say 90% of it was unique. So if we take that same 1,000 clients or guests that have gone on a trip with you for the year, we times that by 90% of all the information that we're getting, so 900. We times that by our 30%, which is our repeat guests, we now have 270 repeat guests. So without doing any additional work except gathering the information and marketing it to people that have already experienced our trip, we've gone from 75 to 270 repeat guests for that same demographic. And granted, this is just an example. Some companies are larger, some companies are smaller, some companies have much higher repeat guest percentage. But the math still holds true. So if you are gathering this information, please put it in a system that you can then market to them, whether it's even if it's just your mail list in MailChimp or Constant Contact, because this information is extremely important. Because in essence, you've already paid the acquisition cost for this guest. And when we start looking at waiver systems, the generation that many companies are going towards is a digital waiver system. So I make a reservation, and this applies whether it's booked online or calling in the office. I receive my confirmation in the email, and I can click on a link, and guess what? I can go in and review your waiver. I can put in the information that you want required. Maybe there's some optional information that you'd like to gather also, like do I have a fishing license in Montana? And if I do, what's my license number? Things like that. And then it's your waiver language that's been cut and pasted into the document, and I can sign it electronically, which meets all the requirements of the electronics document signing law that was passed by Bill Clinton many, many years ago. And with the systems that are connected, when I say connected, there are some standalone digital waiver systems that work well. So they will gather the information, but that information does not automatically flow back into your system that you use for your email marketing or into keeping track of, okay, I've got 5 people arriving today, have they all signed waivers, which would be a reservation system. So there are several flavors of that you can implement. And with most of the cases, what it is, it's the party leader that goes to sign the waiver, and then the party leader is inviting the rest of the party members to sign their waivers. And you could send, many of the systems, you can send an automated email to the party leader. Hey, we can see that, Tom, Dick, and Harry have signed their waivers, but you've still got one person out of your group that hasn't, and it's a month before the trip. And you can get on the water quicker, your check-in experience will be better. Whatever your message that you would like, you could put in that email so that they can click on a link and then remind themselves to, okay, I need to check with Ted because Ted hasn't signed his waiver yet. So the digital waiver system is really convenient for storage and the signing of the waivers and the gathering of the information ahead of time. But what I find the most exciting is your guests are putting in their own information, and that information should be flowing directly into, or at a minimum, an export and an import into whatever system that you're using for marketing to your guests. So it would, if you switch from paper, it would eliminate that whole process of having anybody take information off a paper waiver and putting it into your system. And once again, with the paper waivers, you need to hold on to them for 7 or so years. How many of them in their back are in the back shed, maybe or maybe not getting wet, depending on where you are, or dry. And 2 years from now, you have to go find one. Well, with a digital waiver system, that process can be expedited extremely easily, and it's all stored in. Some of the systems you can still sign paper waivers, i.e., somebody shows up at the river, somehow they got through all the systems and they didn't have a waiver signed, so your guides carry paper waivers just in case. The better systems, you can upload that paper waiver into the system and still have it associated, so you're keeping all the information in one location. And the last one, this last step, the financial payment schedules and processing, once again, I don't want to get too much into the weeds in here, but once again, the concept here is it can reduce steps by your staff, and it can be a touch point for your guest. So after you make the original booking, you've got, maybe you collect 25% upon deposit, 25% 6 months prior, and then the balance 60 days prior. Well, with the different systems that are out there, as far as reservation systems, a lot of the times you can set those additional payments to be made to be collected automatically. So who owes me what when it's due, please go collect it. And for some reason, if the card doesn't go through, then notify me of that exception, and then my staff can work on that exception instead of having to keep track of all of this and run them manually through either a manual terminal or virtual terminal online. And with this process, there are typically automated emails, much like when we're talking about the gear list and whatnot, but they're payment emails. So once again, you can personalize a nice letter that you send a day prior to the payment being processed. Hey, your trip's coming up in 2 months. We just want to let you know the balance of your payments due. Nothing to worry about. We'll take care of it for you automatically. We're going to process your fee tomorrow. We're going to process your credit card on file tomorrow. We just wanted to give you a heads up so that when you get a notice from your bank, that you're not worried about where it came from. So once again, it's that touch point, and it shows them that you were considering their time valuable. Things along those ways. So once again, these are all tools that you can implement parts and pieces of it, even if it's something as simple as just looking at your contact or inquiry form on your website and starting with something that simple. I've talked to some clients now, but also quite a few companies that have a reservation system, they have a separate email system, they have a separate financial system for keeping. They run the cards through a virtual terminal. They enter all the information into QuickBooks, it's being entered twice. They're also writing it into their guide, into the operations book, and using Google Calendars to keep track of your guide scheduling. Some people have 5 or 6 systems, and what it can do is the amount of overlap and the amount of work that goes in can be astronomical. So once again, you don't want to try to conquer it all at one time. Break it into pieces, start with the low-hanging fruit, and kind of go from there. And when you start looking at these processes, strategic plan, big word, doesn't really make a lot of sense. But you're certainly going to have your own unique goals and objectives, or objectives as goals, if I read the screen correctly. So it might be just, I want to free up half of a staff person per year by moving away from 5 systems to 4 or 5 systems to 3. I'm going to break it up into easy chunks. And so whatever those goals are is like when you're talking to people like myself, let us know what those goals are, and that's what we should focus on, not what we think you should do. We can give advice, we can give options of things that you might not have considered, but it boils down to what do you want and how do you want to implement it once you've understood what some of the benefits and options are. The implementation plan, as I said, it can be a toe in the water or jump in fully. It's really up to the individual company. We've had some companies that we've talked to that have jumped in 100%, and within 3 weeks they're up and going and done. We had one company do the process. They went from paper to a reservation system that had a lot of these components in it within a week. Because they'd reached a point where it was more painful to not do anything anymore because the business was growing. They were answering emails at 11 o'clock at night. When the business is starting to manage you instead of you managing the business, that's really a good time to start looking at how can we streamline some of what we do today, even if we don't change anything except automate a few of those pieces. How can we stop making phone calls at 10 o'clock at night when we're, once again, I've talked to, and this can apply to small operators, which can be almost as important, where I've got one small fly shop, that guide service that I'm talking to, and he currently does everything by phone, great guide service, but he works with other companies in town that will book trips for him because he has his own business, but he also is the service provider of fly fishing for other adventure companies in where I live in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. And what they end up doing is they'll call and leave him a message, and then he's on the water, and you certainly don't want to take that sort of message or time when you're with your guest on the water, because that's an insult to injury to the current guest that you've spent the time and having a great time with on a lovely Colorado day. And these other companies that are doing reservations for him, if they had the ability to book online, maybe they're the only ones that can book online, i.e., they know enough about what's going on, so the gentleman hasn't opened it up to the general public, but just to the concierge at hotels or just to certain travel agents or parties that do reservations for them. That it can, as you grow as your size of your operation grows, really think about a virtual reservationist as another person on your team, another staff member. And it goes without saying, we talked about saving labor. What I like to do is the table stakes, how do we reduce our labor costs? And then lowest hanging fruit first. Once again, we're not talking things, you can make it as complicated as you want, but if you make it complicated, the likelihood of success is exponentially decreased. And I hope I haven't said this too many times, but fewer systems equals ease of use and simpler processes. Obviously, you're not going to make a change in season, but if it's something that you want to consider, or once again, maybe it's switching from we send out our newsletters and our monthly emails to our guests out of Outlook. Maybe look at something as simple as Constant Contact or MailChimp. Maybe that's a first step, just to where you can manage your list, you can engage people, people can unsubscribe easily, they can also subscribe to your mail list so that you can engage people on a soft basis. You know what, I'm not ready for a trip yet, I'm relatively young, or maybe I'm new at fishing. I haven't had it as a lifetime passion, but I caught it when I retired. Could be a lot of the baby boomers. The more people, good friends of mine that are in the mid-50s, they aren't retired yet, but for the first time, they actually bought fly equipment and are expecting they want to take some fly fishing lessons, and that's something they'd like to do together because they do a lot of camping. And they do have disposable income. They are the type of guest that you'd want. So as the baby boomers retire, once again, I think we have some opportunities here. And on the flip side of that, stay relevant with how you communicate with the younger generations. And you have to acknowledge, some of them do not want to talk to you. So if your model is to say, we are only going to talk to people, at some point your business will decline when your existing client base reaches an age where they don't fish any longer or don't wing shoot or don't hunt. It may not be immediately, but it might be at some point. And something else I did not put into the slides, that if you are looking at a transition in your business, you might want to sell it. You might want to turn it over to your kids. You have friends that might like to get involved, or maybe you've got somebody that's worked with you for a long time that looks really promising as a general manager that will allow you to take a step away from the day-to-day mundane stuff and spend more time with your guests on the water, which you want to do. Having these type of systems in place and automation in place makes the likelihood of that being able to occur much, much stronger. And if you are looking to sell your business, if you can turn over a turnkey business with processes, once again, it doesn't mean everything's on a single system, but we've got a number of systems in place, and this is how it runs, and here's how the rest of the operation runs, then fantastic. And when at the guide rendezvous, I talked with one gentleman who has a business up in Montana, and he had such a good handle on how his business operates, because he was interested in software and new systems, and he had a unique business, but he had also done such a great job at organizing his business, and here's how we do this. It goes from here to here to here. Here's where our double checks are. Here's how we have somebody be sure that we're not making mistakes, and some checks and balances. He had such a tight system put together, going to a reservation software was not a good answer. It would not have saved him any time. In his case, what he needed to do is move into a CRM system like a Salesforce, where you can build a custom platform on top of something that's close. So that's the direction he was going to look. But so there are always good answers, but sometimes it's not software. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And when we talk about CRM, there's a lot of capabilities. Everything we've talked about today is at a high level. It's to generate ideas. The goal is to generate thought and maybe take some action during the season or after the season, but maybe you can make 2 changes and make an impact. And there are options, we've talked about pretty straightforward, but let's say that if you had a link on your website, or you send out an email and you had 4 links that they could click, or 4 checkboxes, or 4 different types of actions they could take. Well, depending upon what action they take, we want to start a campaign or an automated process that sends them a specific email, If they don't respond, it sends them another slightly different email a week after. If they do respond, it stops that process and triggers a task for somebody on the staff to give them a call. And if it goes to the end of that process and they still have done nothing, we want to drop them into a different long term that sends out maybe quarterly, once again, some form of email or newsletter or phishing update or something along those lines. You can get into very sophisticated marketing operations where you can, the goal being is you want to engage the guests as many points as you can, but the key in that case is that you want your staff to become involved at the key points instead of at every point. And that's like with a Salesforce, a Sugar, a good CRM, Infusionsoft, you have a number of systems out there that are more advanced. And once again, this sort of automation is beyond most reservation softwares. A number of softwares integrate with some of these additional CRM systems because of the power that they have. It'd be silly to try to replicate what somebody else has already done a great job with. So if you're looking to get into that level of sophistication, we're happy to have the conversation and make some recommendations upon what we've seen. We've implemented Salesforce. We've implemented a custom system, as I said, on Salesforce. We've done it with Infusionsoft. We've done it, obviously, with our own softwares where we had to go through the use cases. So we're happy to share our experience in that area with anybody that would like to ask. And once again, we want to be a resource in this partnership. If you have questions, and once again, it may have nothing to do with software, but it has to do somewhat like with technology, we're happy to give you our 2 cents worth. I'm not a developer. I couldn't develop myself out of a box. But I know how it can benefit people, and it's kind of a strange position. I speak both developer and user. A lot of times you'll see a developer, I'll say, I want it developed this way, and they'll say, that doesn't make any sense. I said, well, maybe not to you, but the people that are actually going to use it, that makes perfect sense. And just please just do it that way. So sometimes that's kind of the skill that I bring to the table. Email marketing software, we've talked about. Reservation software, we have our own. There's a number of other products out there that are good systems. And if you don't have reservation software at this time, then give us a call. We're happy to talk through some of the benefits just generally about software without even showing you ours if that's what you prefer. But if you're working on if you've already got a software and you're looking for, we now know what we don't know, and here's what we'd like our next software to do or our current software to do. We're happy to talk about those terms as well, and some different options if you've kind of run into a roadblock, maybe some workarounds, maybe some suggestions that you communicate with your software provider, or how we do things. Once again, whatever's most beneficial to you. And none of this stuff makes sense unless you're going to measure and improve upon your go, or improve as you go. So you should really know what your new guest acquisition cost is. Once again, whether it's SEO, marketing, promotions, and also your return on investment. Now, return on investment is not just what it costs to get a Google click ad, but it's also how much time are you investing staff-wise. A lot of times they just look at I write a check to my internet company, my web company, to Google. That's my cost. Well, you also need to take a look at your staff and include their time as part of that equation. Once again, what's the lifetime value of each guest? All guests are not created equal. Lifetime value could be they've booked with us a number of times. If you're all inclusive, it's simple math. It's how many times do they stay with us? But it might be, they started on a 2-day trip 1 year, and they went the next year another 2-day trip, and then lo and behold, they turned into 7 days. So part of your CRM process could focus on, okay, we want to try to convert the people that have come with us for a 2-day trip, or maybe just a fly cast in school. How do we engage those people through a systematic process to convert the fly fishing school into a 2-day on the river to a 7-day to maybe a 14-day trip to Argentina, or so have you. So once again, it's that repeat guest, but also each time you engage that guest, can you grow it? And I've already said enough about repeat guest percentage. And this is one where the Orvis Endorsed Partners have really hit it out of the park. You guys have the highest repeat guest percentage of companies of any of the verticals that we work in. And I should say, by the way, we are only in the adventure space. We don't do software for anything else. And the last one is an important one if you're looking at systems and if you want to reduce your system, say from 5 down to 2 or whatnot. You look at the cost of your guest stay from the point of when they book a reservation through when they depart, and include those pre-arrival email times and those post-arrival emails that you send. Because what you'll find is, and I've had this happen, well, you know, we pay $2 a year for our reservation software, and it works great, and, you know, we don't want to pay $300 a year. And, you know, once again, both of those values are typically well below what you'll find with good softwares. But just to use as an example, well, if you can go from 5 systems down to 2, and if you can save a full staff position a year, which we have seen before, you need to take those type of things into the equation when you're evaluating systems and looking at the cost of systems. So it really depends, and also the business model. Some models are different than others. We've recently changed ours so that what we do is we put an additional fee that the guest pays. It's just bundled in with the normal taxes and fees. It's not a single line item, but we also pay all your credit card fees. So whenever a credit card is paid or whatnot, we collect that percentage of that. We pay your credit card fees, including Amex, and we keep the balance, the net between those. And anybody that pays with cash or check or thing like that, you keep the percentage that's added. You keep that as additional revenue in your pocket. So there's a lot of different models that are out there, and it depends on what fits best for you. So once again, you need to look at the full guest stay, the value, you know, through that point, because it's truly, sometimes your staff time and your cost of that staff time is your number one expensive item. And sometimes it's not so much that you're going to eliminate staff, but that staff could be doing other things like engaging your clients through different processes. And I've already talked about who we are, so I'm not going to leave this screen up very, very much. We are privately owned. Our whole goal, I guess the best way to sum this up is we want long-term relationships with our clients. We kind of look at ourselves as an extension of your team. But much like you guys provide phenomenal guest experience, whether it's fishing or wing shooting, we provide that same sort of experience, except we do it with software. But we take the same approach and the same, it puts the same value and importance on that relationship and on that experience.